Welcome to the deep dive. We've got a really interesting document here today, the IREDA annual report for fiscal year 2024.
Yeah, it's a deep dive into India's renewable energy landscape, and it's a lot to go through.
Definitely dense. But don't worry, we have you here to help us break it all down. So where should we start?
Well, the report starts with IREDA, and I have to say they've had a pretty good year.
Oh,
They got an excellent rating for the third year in a row on their performance agreement with the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, MNRE for short.
okay.
And that's not all. This strong performance got them upgraded to Navratna status, which is a big deal.
Navratna status. I keep seeing that term, but I'm not really sure what it actually means.
Well, it shows how well they're doing and gives
Yeah.
them more control over their decisions.
Yeah.
You can think of it as them becoming more important in India's move toward renewable energy.
Mm.
And they're already aiming even higher. They want to reach Maharatna status by 2030.
Wow, that's ambitious. But maybe not too surprising considering they just had a really impressive IPO.
Oh, yeah.
They raised 2,150.22 crore, which is a big sign that investors are confident in them, right?
Definitely. And it's not just about the money going public, it also means more transparency, which is really important in a field like renewable energy, which is still pretty new and always changing.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, about the money, I have to admit the financial highlights section was a bit overwhelming for me.
Oh, yeah. It's a lot to take in.
What were the most important things that stood out to you?
Their loan book has grown incredibly fast. They gave out a record over 25,089 crore in loans in fiscal year 2024.
Wow.
That's a massive increase from previous years. It shows how dedicated they are to actually funding the projects that will make India's energy greener. And they're doing it in a smart way, too. Their bad loans have actually gone down.
That's a good sign, right?
Yes, their gross NPA is down to 2.36%, and their net NPA is only 0.99%.
So they're being careful with the money and managing risk well.
Exactly. They've got a system in place to handle all kinds of risks like credit risk, market risk, and operational risk.
That's reassuring. Now, IREDA's not just focused on one type of project. They're involved in everything from solar and wind power to things like green hydrogen and even smart meters. What does this tell us about where India wants to go with energy?
It shows they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. They're trying out lots of different renewable energy technologies, both the well-established ones and the really new ones.
It's great that they're embracing both traditional and cutting-edge technology. I was also really impressed that they've already beaten some of their goals for reducing emissions.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They reached a 33% reduction in emissions intensity way ahead of schedule, and now they're aiming for a 45% reduction by 2030.
And their target for non-fossil fuel energy capacity, they hit 40% a full 9 years ahead of their 2030 target. They're really taking action when it comes to sustainable energy.
It's impressive. And the government is clearly behind this too, right? The report mentions a bunch of policies to help renewable energy grow even faster.
Yeah, they've got some really comprehensive policies. They cover everything from massive solar and wind projects to smaller programs like the PM-KUSUM scheme, which helps farmers use solar energy.
And what about the PM e-bus SOA scheme? Putting 10,000 electric buses on the roads is a pretty big goal.
Definitely. It shows that India is serious about reducing emissions from transportation.
Right.
They're even looking at how all this new renewable energy will fit into the existing power grid.
Ah, that's what I was wondering about. How are they going to do that?
Well, one of the main things they're doing is the green energy corridor projects. They're like building highways for clean energy to travel across the country.
Ah, I like that analogy. Now let's talk about what you mentioned earlier about going beyond just financing. The report talked about borrower experience and using technology, which seems a little unusual for a financial institution.
Yeah, that's what makes IREDA different.
Yeah.
They don't just care about numbers. They want to make the whole process easier and better for the people who borrow from them.
Okay, that's interesting. Tell me more about what they're doing.
Well, they have something called the Close Connect Initiative.
Let's connect.
You wouldn't usually think of a financial institution as being touchy-feely, but that's basically what they're doing here.
Okay.
They're setting up meetings and events with borrowers, industry experts, and even IREDA's own management in cities all over India.
So it's like a road show, but for renewable energy.
Exactly. The point is to really understand what borrowers need, build strong relationships, and be more transparent. It's a very hands-on approach.
I see. That's fascinating. But what about the tech side of things? How are they using technology?
They've built an online platform that handles everything. Everything. From applying for loans and uploading documents to tracking progress and getting updates.
So no more piles of paperwork and endless phone calls.
Right. Borrowers can see exactly where their application is at any time through their own online portal. It's a level of transparency and efficiency that's pretty rare in the financial world.
I can see why IREDA is seen as a leader in this area. But what about internally? How are they helping their own employees?
Well, they've got a whole training plan. They send their employees to top schools in India and abroad for special programs. They even bring in experts for sessions at their own offices. They're really investing in their employees' development.
That's great. And they're not just focused on work, they also care about their employees' well-being.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They have daily meditations and yoga sessions, a gym with professional trainers, and regular health checkups.
Wow, it sounds like they're really taking a holistic approach. But before we go too deep into employee benefits, let's get back to IREDA's overall performance. One thing that impressed me was how quickly they released their audited financial results.
Yeah, they're really proud of that. They were able to release those results in only 19 days.
Wow.
That makes them the fastest in all of India's banking and NBFC sectors. It's way faster than the 60-day deadline set by SEBI.
That's impressive. What does that speed tell us about how they operate internally?
It shows how efficient their internal processes are and how advanced their digital data management is. They're a well-oiled machine, which is reassuring given how much they do and how important their work is.
Okay, so we've talked about IREDA's strong financials, their innovative approach to borrowers and employee development, but they're also doing some really cool things with corporate social responsibility, right?
Yeah, their CSR initiatives are pretty impressive. They're focused on things like health, nutrition, and protecting the environment. And they're not just writing checks, they're really involved in making these projects happen.
Can you give us some specific examples of the projects they're supporting?
In fiscal year 2024, they approved 16 CSR projects, with a lot of them focused on health and nutrition. They've been involved in things like installing solar streetlights and providing educational support in Kalahandi, Odisha, deploying 1,000 solar street lighting systems in Siddharthnagar, Uttar Pradesh, and improving medical and educational facilities in Balrampur, Uttar Pradesh.
Those are real on-the-ground projects that are making a difference in communities. It's great that they're using their knowledge of renewable energy to help improve people's lives.
And they're putting serious money behind it. In fiscal year 2024 alone, they committed 16.65 crore for 16 projects under CSR funds, which even includes administrative costs. And they dispersed 10.29 crore based on how far along the projects were during the year.
That's real commitment. But how do they make sure these CSR initiatives are transparent and accountable?
They've actually created an online CSR portal, so everything is out in the open.
That's a good way to show they're doing things ethically. Okay, so we've talked a lot about IREDA, but let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture. What does this report tell us about the state of renewable energy in India overall?
It's a really positive picture. The report shows that a ton of money is being invested in India's renewable energy sector, over 46 MIRTs. Lock 4 is expected by 2030. And the government is really driving this growth.
The report did mention a big increase in the budget for renewable energy.
Oh yeah, a huge increase. The budget for fiscal year 2025 increased the amount for renewable energy by a whopping 46% compared to last year. It's now at 14,980 crore. That's a clear message from the government that they're serious about moving to a clean energy future.
And it's not just about the money. They've also started a whole bunch of policies and financial incentives to help different clean energy sectors grow. Where should we start?
Let's begin with utility-scale solar and onshore wind. They're two of the biggest players in India's renewable energy scene.
Okay, utility-scale solar and onshore wind, what's happening there?
They've set up a system where they'll accept bids for 50 gigawatts of solar and wind projects every year. That means a constant stream of new projects. And they've said that at least 10 gigawatts of this will be for wind projects between 2023 and 2028.
So it's about keeping things steady and making sure new projects are always being developed.
Exactly. And to make things even more competitive and bring costs down, they're spreading these projects across different agencies: SECI, NTPC, NHPC, and SJVN.
Whoa, hold on a second. Can you remind me what those acronyms stand for?
Of course. SECI is the Solar Energy Corporation of India. NTPC is the National Thermal Power Corporation. NHPC is the National Hydroelectric Power Corporation, and SJVN is the Satluj Jal Vidyut Nigam. Basically, they're all big players in the energy sector, and this makes sure the projects are well distributed.
Got it. So they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. What about those solar parks that were mentioned in the report?
Ah, yes. They've approved a network of 50 solar parks, which together can produce around 37,490 milliw's of power. They're spread out over 12 states, and get this, 10,401 milliW is already up and running.
Wow, that's a lot of solar energy already happening. It seems like these policies are leading to real projects, but what about people who don't have access to these big projects, like those living in cities?
Well, the government is pushing rooftop solar in a big way. They have the PM Suryaghar Muft Bijli Yojana, which wants to get solar on 10 million homes and give them 300 units of free electricity every month.
Free electricity, that's a great reason to get solar.
It is. People could save between 15,000 and 18,000 a year. And the budget for it is pretty big. 75,021 crore.
It sounds like the government is making solar energy accessible to everyone, from individual homeowners to huge utility companies. But what about farmers? They use a lot of energy, especially for irrigation.
You're right, and that's where the PMKUSM scheme comes in. This one's designed to encourage farmers to switch to solar energy, which can help them save money and rely less on fossil fuels.
I'm curious, how does that scheme actually work?
It has a few different parts. The first one is about building grid-connected renewable power plants on land that isn't being used for farming. Farmers' cooperatives, local governments, and water user associations can all take part.
So they're using land that's not good for growing crops to produce clean energy. That's smart. What about the other parts?
The second part is about installing solar-powered water pumps that don't need to be connected to the grid. They want to install 17.5 lakh pumps, each one able to handle up to 7.5 horsepower. This will help farmers get away from diesel pumps, saving them money and cutting down on emissions.
That's good for both the farmers and the environment? And what's the third part?
The third part is about adding solar power to 10 lakh water pumps that are already connected to the grid. This could mean replacing old pumps with solar ones, or adding solar panels to existing pumps to give them extra power.
So they're really covering all the bases when it comes to solar energy and farming. But can farmers actually afford this?
That's a good question, and the government is helping out with financial assistance and subsidies to make it easier for farmers to pay for these solar installations. They know the upfront costs can be a lot, so they're trying to reduce that burden.
This is all really promising. But switching gears for a moment, the report also mentions something called wind-solar hybrid power plants. What's the advantage of combining those two technologies?
Well, these hybrid projects give you a more stable and reliable supply of energy, because wind and solar power often work well together. When the wind isn't blowing, the sun might be shining, and vice versa. Plus, this means less energy is lost during transmission, and it's cheaper overall compared to having separate solar or wind projects.
So they're using the best of both worlds to create a stronger system. And are they actually building these hybrid projects?
Oh yeah, definitely. As of December 31, 2023, India had 1.44 GW of wind-solar hybrid capacity already in operation. And the report thinks this could grow to a huge 9,500 milliW by 2025.
That's amazing. It looks like wind-solar hybrids are a big part of India's renewable energy plan. But let's not forget about hydropower, which is a more traditional source of renewable energy. What's going on in that area?
Hydropower is really important, especially in a country like India, with so many different geographical features. The government has introduced some new things to help make hydropower projects more financially attractive.
What kind of things? Tell me the highlights.
One big change is they're letting hydropower developers set their prices using something called backloading. This lets them charge more in later years so the projects look more appealing to investors.
So it's about making the money work out in the long run. What else are they doing?
They've also made the project life longer. Now it's 40 years, and they've extended the time to repay loans to 18 years. This gives developers more time to earn back their investments and manage their money better. They've also added a 2% increase in the price each year, which helps developers deal with inflation. And to make things even better, they're reducing the fees for transmitting hydropower between states.
Interesting.
These fees could be pretty high, but they'll be gradually reduced starting from July 1st, 2025, until they're completely gone by July 1st, 2028.
So they're trying to make hydropower as appealing as possible to investors. It seems like they're really going all out. But what about transportation? That's a huge source of emissions, both globally and in India.
You're absolutely right, and that's why electric vehicles are becoming so important. The government has been making big progress here, particularly with their PM eBus SOA scheme, which aims to get 10,000 electric buses on the roads in major cities across the country.
That's a big goal, but 10,000 electric buses must be expensive.
It is a big investment. The budget is 57,613 crore, but it shows how committed they are to dealing with emissions from transportation. And it's not just about buses. They're also encouraging people to buy electric cars by offering incentives and building the charging stations and other things people need.
It's great to see this shift towards cleaner transportation, but with all this new renewable energy being generated, can India's power grid actually handle it? That seems like a big challenge.
You've hit on a really important point. The grid needs to be updated and strengthened to handle all this clean energy.
Hmm.
And the government is working on this with things like the Green Energy Corridor projects.
Right, the highways for clean energy we talked about earlier.
Exactly. These projects are about upgrading the power lines, building new substations, and using new technology to make the grid more stable and reliable. They're basically making sure the grid is ready for the future when even more of our energy comes from renewable sources.
That's good to hear. But what about us regular people? How are they helping individuals and households manage this change to a new energy system?
That's where smart meters come in. They're a key part of modernizing the grid and giving people more control over how they use energy.
I've heard of smart meters, but what do they actually do?
They give you real-time information about how much energy you're using so you can see your usage patterns and figure out how to save energy and money. This also helps the utility companies improve their billing, reduce waste, and manage the whole grid better. It's a win-win for everyone.
So it's about giving people more control and helping them become more energy conscious.
That's it. And the government is really pushing for everyone to have them through their Smart Meter National Program, which aims to replace 250 million old-style meters with smart meters. It's a big project, but it has the potential to make India's entire power system way more efficient and reliable.
This is all really encouraging. It seems like India is pushing the boundaries of what's possible with renewable energy and modernizing the power grid.
They definitely are. And IREDA is playing a big role in funding this transition and helping the government reach its ambitious goals.
Okay, we've covered a lot. We've gone from IREDA's impressive financials and their unique initiatives to the bigger picture of India's renewable energy policies and the real progress they're making. It's a really inspiring story. But let's shift gears for a second. I'm interested in IREDA's actual financial performance in fiscal year 2024. They did really well, and it's worth understanding what drove that success.
Yeah, let's take a closer look at the numbers.
Okay, let's start with the basics. What was IREDA's total profit for fiscal year 2024?
Their profit after tax was 1,252.23 crore.
That's a big jump from the 864.63 crore they made the year before, right?
It is. That's a 44.82% increase, which shows how financially strong they are.
That's awesome. What were the main things that helped them grow so much?
Their interest income went way up to 4,822 crore in fiscal year 2024 from 3,374 crore in fiscal year 2023. It shows that their core lending business is doing really well and driving their profits.
So they're making money from what they do best.
Yeah.
What else contributed?
Well, they also made more money from fees and commissions, which reached 60 crore in fiscal year 2024, up from 37 crore the year before. This shows that they're finding new ways to make money.
That's a smart move. Spreading the risk and finding new opportunities for growth. Anything else stand out?
They were good at keeping their operating costs down, which helped boost their profit.
Always a good sign. It shows they're managing their money well and running a tight ship.
You got it. They also made some money from changes in the value of their derivatives, which added 11 crore to their bottom line.
So they're using financial tools strategically to manage their risk and increase their returns. It seems like they really understand the financial world. Now we know they gave out a record UU 25,089 crore in loans in fiscal year 2024, but I'm curious about where all that money went. What does their loan portfolio look like?
Well, as you might guess, most of their loans, 69.27% to be exact, are for solar power projects. That makes sense considering India's big push for solar energy.
That's what I figured. What about the rest of their loans?
Wind energy projects got 10.66%, followed by small hydro projects at 6.72%. They're supporting a variety of renewable energy technologies, but solar is definitely the biggest. But they're also financing projects in newer areas like bioenergy and electric vehicles, which shows they're open to new technologies and want to encourage innovation.
So they're not just sticking with what's popular, they're looking ahead and investing in the future of renewable energy. I was also impressed with their system for managing assets and liabilities. It seems like they're really focused on staying financially stable.
Oh yeah, they are. They have a special committee called the Asset Liability Management Committee, or ALCO, that meets regularly to check on things like liquidity and interest rate risks.
Can you explain what that means in simple terms? I'm not exactly a financial expert.
Sure. Basically, they're keeping a close eye on their cash flow and how changes in interest rates could affect them. They use different methods like gap analysis to see what might happen if interest rates go up or down.
So they're being very careful with their money and making sure they're ready for any changes in the market.
Exactly. And their success in managing their assets and liabilities is a big reason why they're doing so well financially and why they can keep giving money to those important renewable energy projects in India.
Now let's talk about something that's super important these days, going digital. What has IREDA done to transform digitally?
They've embraced the digital world in a lot of ways. They've switched to e-office practices to use less paper and make their internal processes more efficient. It's good for both efficiency and the environment.
Definitely. What else have they done?
They've set up a strong cybersecurity system to protect their computer systems and data from cyber attacks. That's crucial nowadays, and they're clearly taking it seriously. They're following international best practices and frameworks like ISO 27001, and they do regular security checks.
So they're not just using old, outdated systems, they're staying ahead of the game when it comes to cybersecurity.
You bet. And they're also making progress on the digital side of things that their customers see. They have an online portal where borrowers can check on their loans, track their applications, and submit documents online.
So everything is in one place, which makes things much easier and more transparent.
Exactly. And they've also put in place an online system for managing loans, which automates a lot of the work and makes the whole loan process smoother. It's all about using technology to improve how they work and make things better for their customers.
The one thing I found interesting in the report was their focus on promoting Hindi, which is the official language of India.
Yeah, they're making a real effort to encourage people to use Hindi in their daily work. It's a pretty interesting part of their approach.
I'm curious, what are they actually doing to make that happen?
Well, they're organizing workshops and meetings in Hindi. They're offering Hindi typing classes for employees, and they're making it mandatory to have Hindi songs on all the computers.
It sounds like they're creating an environment where people feel comfortable using Hindi.
They are.
Yeah.
And they've even translated important documents and communications into Hindi so everyone can understand them.
That's a great example of inclusivity. Now let's talk about something that's incredibly important for any organization, especially a financial one like IREDA. Transparency and accountability. How are they handling that?
Transparency is really important to them. They have a strong right to information RTI system, so anyone can ask for and get information about what they're doing. They also have a whistleblower policy to encourage employees and others to report any wrongdoing.
Those are both good signs that they want to be ethical and responsible.
Absolutely. And they don't stop there. They follow all the rules about disclosing information set by SEBI and the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, so they're meeting the highest standards of corporate governance.
Okay, we've covered a lot here. We've looked at their financial performance, their efforts to go digital, their commitment to Hindi, and their dedication to transparency and accountability. But there's always another side to the story, right?
Exactly. While IREDA has a lot to celebrate, they also face some challenges and risks as they work in the ever-changing world of renewable energy.
Okay, let's dive into those challenges. What are some of the biggest hurdles IREDA needs to overcome?
One big one is that the rules and regulations are always changing. The renewable energy sector in India is pretty new, and the government is constantly updating and tweaking the rules as they learn more and adjust their policies.
So it's like trying to hit a moving target.
Yeah, sometimes it feels that way.
No.
This constant change makes things uncertain for investors and can affect how long projects take and how much they cost. IREDA has to be really flexible and adaptable to keep up with these changes and make sure they're always following the rules.
I can see how that would be tough. What other challenges are they dealing with?
Another big one is finding enough long-term, low-cost funding. Renewable energy projects often need a lot of money up front, and it takes a while before they start making money.
So they need investors who are patient and willing to wait for a return on their investment?
Exactly. And while the government is helping out financially, IREDA still needs to get a lot of money from other places like banks and other financial institutions. And these institutions might have different ideas about risk and how much money they expect to make back. So it's a tricky balancing act for IREDA.
It sounds like a constant challenge to secure the funding they need at rates that make sense for these projects. But what about competition? Are there other organizations trying to get a piece of the renewable energy pie?
Definitely. There's a lot happening in the Indian renewable energy sector, and it's attracting attention from both Indian and foreign companies. IREDA has to compete with other financial institutions, both public and private, that all want to finance these profitable projects.
So it's not just about having the money, it's about having the right strategy and offering good terms to win those projects.
Exactly. They need to be creative and find ways to offer more than just money. It's like a race to get the best projects and the most promising technologies.
Now let's switch gears and talk about risks. What are some of the biggest risks IREDA is facing in this evolving landscape?
One of the biggest risks for any financial institution is credit risk, and that's true for IREDA too. This is the risk that borrowers might not be able to pay back their loans, which could mean big financial losses for IREDA.
So they have to be really careful about who they lend money to and how they structure those loans.
You got it. They have a thorough process for checking out potential borrowers and making sure their projects are viable. But there's always a chance that something unexpected could happen, like delays in the project, costs going higher than expected, or changes in the market.
It's true, you can never predict everything. What other risks do they need to manage?
Interest rate risk is another big one. This is the risk that if interest rates change, it could affect the value of their assets and liabilities. As we discussed earlier, they're managing this risk through their ALCO committee and by using gap analysis, but they still need to keep a close eye on it, especially because interest rates can be pretty unpredictable these days.
Right, the market can be a wild ride. Are there any other risks that are specific to IREDA or the renewable energy sector in general?
Well, like any business, they have to deal with operational risks.
Like what?
These could be things like fraud, cyber attacks, natural disasters, or even just problems with their internal processes. Any of these things could disrupt their work and affect their performance.
So having strong internal controls and ways to manage risk is really important.
Definitely. They need to have solid systems in place to reduce these risks and make sure they can keep operating effectively, even if unexpected challenges come up.
And there's one more risk that's particularly relevant to renewable energy. Technology risk. Technology risk, what does that mean?
It's the risk that new technologies will come along and make the old ones obsolete. The renewable energy field is always changing, with new innovations popping up all the time.
Right.
There's always a chance that investments in today's technologies could become outdated or less competitive as newer, more efficient technologies hit the market.
So they're trying to predict the future of technology.
Kind of. They need to be thinking ahead and be ready to adapt. They have to constantly evaluate new technologies and make smart investments that will last. It's about finding a balance between sticking with what works and embracing innovation to stay ahead of the game.
Wow, that's a lot to think about. It sounds like financing renewable energy projects is a pretty complicated and challenging business.
It definitely is. But IREDA seems to be doing a great job. They're approaching these challenges with a clear vision, a good track record, and a commitment to always improving.
Now, one thing I'm really interested in is IREDA's role in promoting environmental and social sustainability. It's not just about giving money to renewable energy projects, it's about making sure those projects are developed and operated responsibly.
You're right. IREDA knows that environmental and social sustainability are really important. They have a system called the Environmental and Social Management System, or ESMS, to guide how they lend money and make sure these projects aren't doing harm while trying to do good.
Can you tell me more about this ESMS? What does it actually involve?
It's a set of principles and procedures that IREDA uses for all their projects to identify and reduce potential environmental and social risks. It covers a lot of different things, like controlling pollution, protecting biodiversity, acquiring land responsibly, and involving the community.
So it's like a checklist for responsible development, making sure these projects are well thought out and don't have a negative impact.
Exactly. It's about making sure these renewable energy projects don't create new problems while trying to solve old ones.
That makes a lot of sense. But how do they make sure that the people borrowing money actually follow these principles? It's one thing to have a system, but it's another to make sure it's being used effectively.
That's where their due diligence process comes in. They carefully check out the environmental and social aspects of each project before they agree to lend money. This means assessing the potential risks and requiring borrowers to come up with detailed plans to manage those risks.
So it's not just about checking boxes, it's about having a real plan to manage these risks and make sure the project is developed responsibly.
Exactly. And they don't stop there. They keep an eye on how these plans are being followed throughout the entire project, from construction to operation, to make sure everything stays on track.
That's great.
Yeah, it's a really robust system. It makes sure that sustainability is part of every project. They're not just giving money, they're actively involved in how these projects are done.
That's really impressive. It shows they're taking their responsibilities seriously. It's not just about building solar panels or wind turbines. It's about doing it in a way that benefits everyone. But it's not just about external projects, right? IREDA also has to think about their own sustainability.
Oh, definitely. They're doing their part too. They have a bunch of initiatives to reduce their own environmental impact.
Like what?
Well, they've gone digital with e-office practices, so they use less paper, and their internal processes are smoother. They've also made their offices more energy efficient by switching to LED lights and encouraging employees to use public transportation.
So they're walking the walk, so to speak. Any other interesting initiatives?
They've put solar panels on their own office building to generate clean energy, so they're relying less on the grid. And they have a whole program to manage waste, minimizing waste and recycling as much as possible.
It's great that they're not just talking about sustainability, they're actually doing it themselves. But let's be real, they're a financial institution at heart. Their expertise is managing money, not power plants, right?
That's true, and that actually brings up an interesting challenge for them, managing their legacy assets.
What do you mean by that?
They actually own a 50 million W solar power plant in Kasaragod, Kerala. It was built back in 2016.
Oh, wow. So they're not just financing projects, they're actually owning and operating one themselves.
Exactly. And it's been a learning experience for them. Running a power plant is very different from their main business of lending money.
I bet. What kind of challenges have they faced?
Well, running a power plant means you have to deal with complex technical systems. Make sure you're following all the environmental rules and handle all sorts of operational risks.
Huh?
Things can go wrong, like equipment breaking down or even natural disasters.
So they've had to learn a whole new set of skills to manage this power plant.
They have. They've put together a team of experts in power plant operations and maintenance, and they're using technology to make the plant run better and more efficiently.
Makes sense. But what about the financial side of things? How is the plant doing?
It's running at full capacity and making money, which is
Yeah.
great news. But they've had some issues with figuring out the price they can charge for the electricity, which has affected their revenue.
Really? What happened?
The contract they signed with the Kerala State Electricity Board, KSEB for short, didn't have a fixed price for the electricity. It had to be approved by the Kerala State Electricity Regulatory Commission, or KSERC.
So they didn't know how much they would be paid from the start.
Right. And unfortunately, the KSERC set a price that was lower than what IREDA expected. So they're making less money than they thought they would.
Oh, that's tough. So what are they doing about it?
They're talking to both KSEB and KSERC to try to figure out a solution that works for everyone and make sure the power plant can be profitable in the long term. It's complicated, but they're being proactive and trying to find a win-win situation.
It sounds tricky, but I'm sure they'll find a way. They've definitely shown they can handle tough situations. Now, something else that caught my eye in the report was IREDA's international collaborations. They seem to be involved in a lot of global events and partnerships.
They are. IREDA knows that moving to clean energy is a global effort, and working with other countries is essential for sharing knowledge, transferring technology, and getting funding.
It makes sense to learn from each other and combine resources to tackle such a big challenge. Can you give us some examples of what they're doing internationally?
They go to all the big international conferences and exhibitions about renewable energy events like Intersolar Europe in Germany and Future Energy Asia in Thailand. Give them a chance to show off what India is doing and learn from other countries.
So they're both learning and teaching on the world stage, but what about more specific collaborations?
They've partnered with organizations like KfW, which is a German development bank, to finance renewable energy projects in India together.
Interesting.
These partnerships give IREDA access to long-term, low-cost loans, which are really important for big projects. Plus, they get to benefit from the technical know-how of other countries.
It sounds like a win-win situation. Any other notable collaborations?
They're also working with international groups like the United Nations Development Program, or UNDP, on various initiatives related to renewable energy and climate change.
So they're really becoming a global player in the renewable energy field, not just an Indian one.
Exactly. And their work on the international stage is helping India become known as a leader in the global shift toward clean energy. It shows the world that India is serious about tackling climate change and creating a sustainable future.
Speaking of climate change, how is IREDA contributing to India's efforts to fight it?
They're playing a crucial role. By financing renewable energy projects, they're directly helping to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and lessen the effects of climate change.
Can you put a number on that? How much CO2 are they actually helping to prevent?
Their report says that their financing in fiscal year 2024 alone helped avoid about 32.97 million tons of CO2 emissions.
That's huge. And it's not just about reducing emissions. They're also promoting sustainable development in a broader way, right?
Got it. Through their ESMS, they're making sure the projects they finance are environmentally and socially responsible. They're expanding energy access, creating jobs, and contributing to economic growth in a sustainable way.
It's a holistic approach that takes into account how environmental, social, and economic issues are all connected.
Exactly. And their commitment to sustainability aligns with India's national goals and their commitments under the Paris Agreement.
So they're not just a company. They're a key player in helping India achieve its climate goals and transition to a cleaner, more sustainable future. Now let's look ahead. The report mentions some ambitious goals and plans for growth. What are some of the key things IREDA is looking to achieve in the coming years?
They're definitely not slowing down. They have a clear vision for the future, and they're taking action to make it happen. Remember how we talked about Maharatna status? That's one of their big goals. They want to achieve that by 2030.
Right, they're aiming for the top. But what about their main business? How much do they expect their loan book to grow?
They're aiming for a loan book of 10 lakh crore by 2030. That's a huge increase from where they are now, and it shows how ambitious they are.
That's a massive jump. How are they planning to grow that much?
They have a multi-pronged strategy. They're planning to expand their operations, move into new market segments, and offer new financial products and services to meet the changing needs of the renewable energy sector.
Can you give us some specific examples of these new areas they're exploring?
They're looking at financing projects in cutting-edge areas like green hydrogen, offshore wind farms, and energy storage solutions.
Wow.
They know the energy landscape is always changing, and they need to adapt to stay ahead of the game.
So they're not just following trends, they're trying to predict them and become leaders in these new fields.
Exactly. And to make this growth possible, they're also focusing on improving their digital capabilities. This means improving their online platforms, getting better at analyzing data, and strengthening their cybersecurity.
It sounds like they have a solid plan for growth. They have ambitious goals, but they also understand the challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with some things to think about. What are some key takeaways or questions that our listeners should ponder as they think about IREDA's journey and the future of renewable energy in India?
That's a great point. We've seen all the great things IREDA has accomplished and what they hope to do, but it also brings up some important questions. For example, as IREDA gets bigger and does more, how will they balance their commitment to social and environmental responsibility with their financial goals?
That's a tough question. It's not always easy to make those two things work together. Profitability and sustainability aren't always on the same page.
That's right. And how will they keep up with all the new technologies coming out? How will they make sure their investments stay relevant and competitive as new technologies emerge and disrupt the market? Renewable energy is a fast-moving field, so staying ahead of the curve is crucial.
It's like playing chess. They have to think ahead and make strategic decisions that will set them up for success in the long run. What other questions should our listeners consider?
I think it's important to think about how IREDA's role might change as India tries to reach its big renewable energy goals. Will they stay mainly a financing institution, or will they become more involved in things like shaping policy, encouraging innovation, or even developing projects themselves?
That's an interesting question. They're clearly already more than just a lender. They're a major force in the whole ecosystem.
Exactly. And as the sector grows, their role is likely to change too.
Hmm.
They might start setting standards, promoting best practices, and even pushing for policy changes that help the renewable energy sector grow.
And finally, I think our listeners should think about the bigger picture of what IREDA's success means.
What do you mean? Their success really shows that renewable energy can be a good investment and that it has huge potential in India. It's a story that can inspire other countries and prove that moving to a clean energy future is not just a dream, it's something we can actually achieve.
It shows that investing in renewable energy can be good for the planet and good for business.
Exactly. IREDA's story isn't just about India. It's a story that has implications for the whole world.
And that's a great point to consider as we move forward. This deep dive into IREDA's annual report has been quite a journey.
It really has. I mean, we've gone through their financials, their initiatives, their dedication to sustainability.
Yeah, and it's become clear that IREDA is more than just about giving out loans. They're a key player in India's shift to a cleaner, more sustainable future.
Definitely. And they're doing it in a way that makes sense both financially and socially. Their commitment to their environmental and social management system, making sure projects are done right, that's really commendable.
It really sets them apart. They're not just handing out money. They're shaping the whole sector, by encouraging best practices and holding both themselves and their borrowers accountable.
Yeah, and their impact goes beyond India, too. They're collaborating internationally.
Right. Through those collaborations, they're sharing what they know and helping the whole world move towards clean energy.
Absolutely. It's inspiring to see an organization like IREDA doing so much, both in India and globally. As we wrap up this deep dive, I feel really optimistic about the future of renewable energy in India.
Me too. India is making incredible progress, and IREDA's success is a big part of that. Their ambitious goals and innovative thinking make me think the best is yet to come.
I agree. And I'm especially excited to see how they continue to evolve and adapt as they move into new areas like green hydrogen, offshore wind, and energy storage.
Yeah, it seems like they're always looking for the next big thing.
And their commitment to sustainability gives me confidence that they'll do it responsibly, making a positive impact every step of the way.
It's truly an inspiring story of change and a sign of hope for a cleaner, more sustainable future for India and the world. Thanks for joining us on this incredible deep dive into the world of IREDA.
It's been a pleasure sharing these insights with you. We hope this has sparked your interest and inspired you to learn more about the amazing possibilities of renewable energy.